Okay. All right, we are back now. Revelation chapter 14 today. As we look at this passage, it's again a continuation of the vision that John has after that seventh trumpet is blown in chapter 11. That's when we ended. And then we have this series of visions here. Chapter 12, the woman and the dragon. Remember that whole conflict. And then the dragon, of course, representing the devil, the one behind the scenes, the source of all the evil, pursuing the faithful Jews who bring forth the Messiah, and also the offspring of the woman, all those who keep the commandments of God. That was in chapter 12. In chapter 13, the devil now calls forth out of the sea his manifestation, his physical form, the beast who comes forward. And so it is an evil version of sort of the Trinity, where in the Trinity you have the Father, who's the invisible God, who exalts his Son, the visible image of the invisible God, the Son who is in perfect alignment with the Father's will and rises to reign and set up a kingdom here on earth. So the dragon comes forth and gives his power to the beast, physical manifestation of evil. And the beast, as he's described to us, is sort of, it's not just one particular thing. It really is the political powers of this world aligned against the church and against God's people. So everywhere there is this persecution of believers, everywhere you see political powers using that power not to govern but to persecute and to oppress, especially God's people. We have them called beasts, like Babylon is that lion, and Persia the bear, and Greece is the leopard, and then Rome as this terrifying beast who kind of puts it all together. But don't think for a minute that we're done with the beast here, even though it refers to those empires. That beast continues today in many different forms and shapes, as we can attest, and seems to be rising here in America too, as we go forward. So that's where we kind of left off last time, chapter 13, and at that time he says there was a second beast also, because there's another threat. What was the second beast? What was his job, if you remember from chapter 13?
Well, he's a false prophet.
Yeah, he's also called a false prophet a little later on. He looks like
the first beast, right? To promote the first beast.
Yeah, he promotes the first beast, and that time, you know, what John is dealing with and the church is dealing with in the first century is the beast at his time is clearly Rome, and the imperial cult, which is calling people to worship the Roman Empire, is the second beast. So you have this dual threat of evil on earth, in that the political powers aligned against God, but then the deception of the people through false religions that come in the church or are just in the culture that are promoting this. And you see that today. You see the same thing today, political powers at work aligned, but then also false religions that are promoting these political powers as well. And if you've been following some of there's a cult-like feel to a lot of things happening in politics. I don't know if you've noticed that. Some of the climate change movement is this, it's really a religion that they're dealing with. The transgender thing, all these different things, there is a cultish zeal about them. It's beyond just voting on things and compromising and coming to common sense solutions. There's this passion, this zeal that is really a religious zeal of people deceived. And in this case, he says it all kind of works together to get people to worship the beast, to give their allegiance to it through fear or deception, whatever it is, and threatening, and that the mark of the beast, we are told, if you remember, what was the mark of the beast about? What does it mean what does it mean to have the mark of the beast?
Well, no one could buy or sell unless he has the mark.
Yes. So that was the one of the reasons why people got the mark of the beast, was so that they could engage in the economy, engage in life. But what did it mean to actually have the mark of? Are we talking about a literal tattoo on your forehead?
I thought it was significant last week when you mentioned the one of the primary points in Live Not by Lies is they know that you belong to them if you repeat the lie.
Yeah.
That you're not a threat to them. So if you're taking the mark of the beast, it's along those lines. You don't give a hoot, you know.
Yeah.
You're willing to yield to him, and there's no opposition, and therefore you are no threat to the beast. Yeah,
you're really compliant to the business. You're not in the way of you're completely compliant, playing along with it, because you don't want trouble. You don't want trouble. That's why there's this call for endurance for the saints. It's going to be painful to stay true to Christ in these moments. When the evil day comes, it's going to require endurance on our part.
Would that be kind of like an opposite to the fact that it says that the 144,000 had the name of the Father written on their foreheads?
Exactly right. Yeah. So it's not, again, it's not a literal, just like the mark of the Lamb is not a literal mark on our foreheads. That's what we're going to look at today. You see in chapter 14, it begins the Father's name written on their foreheads. We know that's not a literal thing they're talking about. We understand that. And so there's no reason to think that the mark of the beast is a literal mark on somebody, but rather it's symbolic of if you have the mark, it means you're owned. They own you. And so that's a lot of what these totalitarian states you see happen is they own you. And they use threats because of your, we all want to live in this world. We all want to be successful and be happy and be left alone. And they promise to give you what you want, but in exchange, you belong to them.
So if you have the audacity to tell somebody there's only two genders, then
yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's the madness of today.
Yeah.
That wasn't the madness of yesterday, but it's the madness of today. Each generation has its own madness and lies that we tell, and the beast comes. You'll notice the beast comes in different forms. Sometimes the lion, sometimes the leopard, sometimes the bear. They all have appetites, but they manifest it in different ways. And we have to be ready. But he says here, the number of the beast is 666. He says he should calculate the number of the beast. We gave a little bit of a definition, thoughts on that. It's still, there's no definitive answer to that question of what is the number of the beast. There are different theories of what it is. If you can remember some of the different theories that have been proposed.
Well, the numerology came out to be Nero.
Yeah, one theory is at that time when John is writing this, that the 66, the number of the name, and that was a common phrase at that time. People would talk about. There was even a poem apparently written. They found in an archaeological dig of some sort of a guy telling of his love of a woman and saying, and the number of her name was like 654 or something like that. Some kind of. So it was sort of a little coded love language where every name had a number to it. So the number for Nero Caesar, if you calculate it with the Hebrew, it's 666. Or 616 if you leave out a letter, which was another form of spelling it. That's one possibility that seems to make sense to me at that time.
Wasn't Ronald Reagan another one?
Ronald Reagan's another possibility. Yes. But you can really, the challenge with the calculated number is that if you have someone in mind, you can show some way that their number fits the beast. And so I actually did that. I had a history of math paper that I did back in 1990. I was taking a class on the history of math, and I did my paper on called beasting, not beasting, but beasting someone. So when you take somebody and show that their name fits the number of the beast. And so what I did was I wrote a little bit of paper, and I just gave the different theories that people had. You know, some thought it was Nero, some thought it was Hitler, Napoleon. You've got, you know, all these different characters, and Martin Luther said it was the Pope. The Pope said it was Martin Luther, and everyone's going back and forth. And so I definitively said, I'm going to settle this once and for all. And I came up with this crazy system to show that my professor was actually the beast. So I took his name.
Where'd you get in the class?
He loved the paper. He actually loved it. But I mean, you can manipulate it if you're good at numbers. It's not hard to do it, to find some kind of system, and then you kind of explain it backwards. And that's why I'm always suspicious about, you know, when you're making it up. So there's that part of it. That's why my professor in seminary didn't think that the number 666 was referring to any specific person at all. He believed that the number 6, if you remember, is what's the significance of the number 6 in the scriptures?
Man's number.
Man's number. And so it's man's number we're talking about here. Unlike the 7s of God, the 6s fall short of the 7. Man is created on the 6th day. And so this is, the beast is the glory of man. It would basically, you know.
That's interesting, because it's kind of like holy, holy, holy. I mean, it's the opposite side of it. 666.
He makes a compelling case for it, and I think that's interesting. That you know, especially the way numbers are used in Revelation, we see them used in some really symbolic ways, not necessarily in literal ways. So it's an interesting possibility too. But that was from last week, and honestly, for us, it's. I think for John's original audience, calculating the number of the beast was really important. I think they knew how to do that. For us, I don't think it means this. It doesn't matter so much for us that we calculate the number of the beast, but understand what the beast is and how he works, so that we can be ready.
And it says right there, let the one who has understanding, calculate the number of the. It's like you're starting to say, an understanding of what it means to be beast.
Yeah. And there are those who had the understanding to know how to do this. Not everyone could figure it out, but the main points we don't want to miss. And that's unfortunately, I think that's the temptation with Revelation all the time, is you can get caught up on rabbit trails and start and be consumed by something like this and miss the whole point of this story. And instead you're looking at conspiracies, looking over your shoulder, being afraid of shadows. Meanwhile, there's the beast right in front of you, looming over you, and you don't even get it, you know? So, all right, we'll pick it up chapter 14 now. He has another look, another vision, and let's take a look at that here. So, Bob Fowler, would you mind reading that for us, verses 1 to 5?
Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they were singing a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and before the elders. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits of God for God and the Lamb. In their mouth no lie was found, for they are blameless.
Right. So we'll start first here where he says, I looked and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb. Now we know the Lamb is, who of course is the Lamb?
Jesus.
Jesus is presented continually as the Lamb, the one who was sacrificed and rose again, the Lamb that was slain. And he's standing on Mount Zion. And that's the question is, what is Mount Zion?
That's where the temple was.
Exactly right, right? So Jerusalem was a city on 7 hills as well, 7 mountains. And one of them, Mount Zion, is the mount where the temple would be. It's referenced in Hebrews 12. I'm going to take a look at that passage of what's meant by Mount Zion here. So Hebrews 12 and verses 18 to 24 speaks clearly about what this is. So Bob Thomas, would you get that for us, 18 to 24?
Yep. If you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further message be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it should be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I trembled with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel.
Okay, so this, if you remember that passage in Hebrews 12, he's telling the believers who are coming out of Judaism, and some are tempted to go back to the temple, go back to reject Christianity because of the trouble it's giving them. And he tells them, you know, you've not come to, what mountain is he talking about here at the beginning? The blazing fire, the darkness, the gloom, where Moses is terrified.
Mount Sinai.
That's Mount Sinai, right? You're not come. That's the law. That's not the mountain we're coming to. This mountain that condemns us and damns us with the law. No, but we're coming to instead Mount Zion. But he doesn't mean the literal Mount Zion, does he? Here, what is he talking about?
Is the heavenly Jerusalem. The Mount Zion is its most dramatic expression is heaven.
Yeah. Mount Zion, that the mountain on which the temple was built, was just a copy of the real Mount Zion, the real heavenly mountain where the Lord dwells, with innumerable angels in joyful gathering, and the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. That's the saints here, and to God, the judge of all, and the spirits of the righteous made perfect. When we talk about the spirits of the righteous, who are we talking about here?
Believers.
When he says the spirits of the righteous, what does it say about those believers?
They've already died.
They've died, right? They're with the Lord. So these are the spirits of the righteous made. This is what you've come to, this joyful assembly, and you're entering into it, and the mediator of a new covenant, and so forth and so on. Beautiful picture here. But he describes our fellowship as, and we sometimes refer to this in church, we have the saints below and the saints above, that we're still in communion, in fellowship and in union with our brothers and sisters who have died and are with the Lord. They are not gone and lost. They have just relocated, and they are the spirits of the righteous, and we come and we're in fellowship with them. Even though we're still on earth and they're in heaven, we are still in fellowship with those who've gone before.
I see that. This is a great passage, because I've mentioned this before, but I always get a feeling we're standing and singing at MSBC that something is much bigger than what is apparent.
Yeah.
Much bigger. And I'm thinking of this passage.
It's
it's a dramatic picture.
Yeah, it really is. It's so encouraging to know we're not alone in this. There's so much bigger going on. So now come back to Revelation 14, and you see here, we're talking about the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. This here is the heavenly Mount Zion. What's the heavenly vision here he's seeing? So that with him, he has these 144,000. Now that 144,000, we've mentioned them before. If you remember where they were back in chapter 7, this 144,000, what's the significance of 144,000? What's that number mean?
It's made up of the tribes of Israel.
It does list them out as the 12 tribes, although it's not quite the 12 tribes of Israel. It's a little bit of an odd, if you remember that list. It's not typical.
It's 12 tribes, but it's showing the believers.
Yeah, it's symbolically listing out the sons of Israel. But again, when you look at these sons, these are not the sons of Israel. I mean, some of them are: Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon. But Levi is never listed among in a number like a census like this. Levi is the priest. They're never listed, and they don't go to war. This is a list for war. And you have Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. But if you remember, something's missing in this list.
Dan's missing.
Yeah, Dan is missing. That was a tribe. That was always listed. And then Ephraim is replaced by Joseph. And that's confusing. So it's the way it's listed out. We kind of went through it before. This is not a literal list of all the tribes and the 144,000 from these tribes. It is a symbolic representation of the faithful, of the church, listed out like an army going to war. And the 12 is the number of what?
God's people.
It's God's people. 12 is God's people. And so the 12 times 12,000 is this complete number of God's people. But in this context here in 14, this 144,000 is a complete number of God's people, but there's something interesting about them. How are they described for us in this passage? The first thing we see about them is what? They stood with the Lamb on Mount Zion. And verse 1.
They were not defiled.
They were not defiled. That comes a little later on.
There's name written on their forehead.
The Father's name is written on their forehead. So they are owned. These belong to God. They're his family. They're his children. They're sons they're standing with the Lamb. So like he is their brother. And they all have their Father's name, right? And then it says, I heard a voice from heaven like the roar of many waters and like the sound of thunder. Now, a couple things about this. That phrase, many waters and the sound of loud thunder. Do you remember the significance of the many waters, what that was about? If you can remember that. We touched briefly on it one time.
The whole world.
Yeah. The sound of, in Isaiah 17:12, the thunder of many peoples. They thunder like the thundering of the sea, the roar of nations. They roar like the roaring of mighty waters. So the 144,000 are not to be thought of as Jews or as only the tribe of Israel, but this roar of many waters is, like we saw in chapter 7, that they are representing people from all different tribes and nations. Remember that in Revelation 7, where John hears the listing of the 144,000 in the first part, but then in the second part, he looks and he doesn't see Jews. What does he see?
People of all tribes and languages.
Yeah, a great multitude from every tribe and language and people. So we had that scene before. Remember, John hears about the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and then he looks and he sees the Lamb that was slain. Same thing, something he hears and then something he sees. Something he hears is the numbers of the sons of Israel, but when he looks, the true sons of Israel are from every nation and tribe and language and people. And so these 144,000 are are those. But there's something also about these 144,000 as they're standing with him. When he hears the voice and hears the thunders and the waters, right? But then the voice he hears sounds like what?
The singing, playing the harp.
Yeah, they're singing and playing the harp, right? So these, don't be mistaken, the thunder and the waters in this context are not the sounds of armies coming in judgment. But what is the sound they're bringing? Of singing and of harps, which means what?
Joy.
Joy. Yeah. And singing, we had that phrase before, singing a new song. I'm trying to think where that was. I think that was Revelation 5, where they sing a new song. They're holding a harp. These are the 24 elders. Remember the 24 elders?
Yep.
Before the Lamb, they're holding a harp and they're singing a new song. So these 144,000 are joining the elders with their harps, singing a new song. And what's the new song they're singing? Let's read that one more time, verses 9 and 10. Claudette, would you get that for us?
Sure. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth."
Yeah, that's the new song they're singing.
I did a little research on this, the singing of songs not too long ago. Sharon and I were talking about something, and what I found was that in the scriptures, like the Song of Moses after the Red Sea thing, whenever there's a great victory,
yes,
of some type, that you end up having this with the Song of Moses. You get, sometimes they call it the Magnificat of Mary, sometimes they call that the Song of Mary. Yeah, that appears to be after a great victory. They come up with this song to commemorate it.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's not that they're singing a new song like they're sitting down writing new pieces of music. It's the singing a new song means that God has delivered them again in a new way, or there's a new deliverance that he has just brought them through, and they sing a new song. They couldn't sing that song before Christ comes and ransoms us, but now we can. And same thing with Moses and the crossing the Red Sea. It's great. So they sing a song, and look where these 144,000 are. In verse 3, where are they?
Before the throne.
They are before the throne. So when we saw them back in chapter 7, let me just see how that worked. Back in chapter 7, we see, "Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." Where are they back in chapter 3? Well, they seem to be still on the earth, right? They seem to be there at this point. But now in chapter 14, these saints are before the throne, and it tells us, well, what happened to them? Well, they had been, he uses that phrase, redeemed from the earth. They have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God. What does that mean? They've been redeemed from the earth. What do you think that is?
Well, it's like they've died and been brought to heaven.
Yeah. They've been brought out of this earth. They have died. I suspect this 144,000 goes along with chapter, was it 6? When they ask, "How long, O Lord?" Remember the saints who were martyred?
Yeah.
And what did he tell them?
Wait a little while.
A little while longer. What has to happen first? Until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete. who were to be killed as they themselves had been. So the 144,000 in this context in chapter 14, I would argue, is the complete number, those who were to be killed. Remember, he could not come and judge the earth and avenge their blood until the full number of those who had to be killed were killed, those who belonged to him. And so that 144,000 is a complete number of God's people, in this case, of those who were the first fruits for God and for the Lamb. These are the first ones to be harvested for God and for the Lamb, the first fruits. It describes them in a few different ways here too, about these 144,000. What does that mean? No one could learn that the song except the 144,000. No one could learn that song.
Well, if it was the same song we were just looking at, back a few chapters, it's believing that Jesus died for them.
Yeah. They've experienced, here's the thing, is you sing the song when you've experienced the salvation. That's when you sing. That's why we sing in church all the time. We sing in response to our salvation. We've experienced that. And so these 144,000 are those who have experienced the salvation. That's why they know the song and sing the song. No one else outside of them, there's no one who has learned the song who has experienced this. In a sense, the 144,000 represents the multitudes who are marked by the Lamb, who belong to the Lamb. Those who are not them are marked by the beast. They don't know the song of the Lamb. They've not experienced that. They will not experience that salvation. And they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They've not defiled themselves with women. What do you think? What is that a reference to? What's that about? That they've not defiled themselves with women. It kind of references a story that you may or may not remember.
Is this back in Genesis at the very beginning when the sons of men married the women?
Yeah, the sons of God, they took the women. Yeah, that was a defiling of themselves. Absolutely. There is a passage that refers to an army that it specifically said that these men, they were coming to the priest and they were hungry, and the priest was willing to give them bread from the temple, even, or the because of the tabernacle. And one of the things that was required of them, that they for battle, they had not defiled themselves with women. They had not slept with women, so they were ceremonially pure. If you remember that scene, it's in 1 Samuel 21. It's when David, if you remember, was in exile, and he is God's anointed one, but he's being chased by Saul. It's very similar to the situation the believers are dealing with here, because David is the anointed king, but he's not on his throne. He's being persecuted. He hasn't ascended to his throne yet. Saul is the beast here chasing him. He's a madman chasing him to kill him. And David with his men find refuge at the tabernacle, and they get refreshment, and he insists, my men are ceremonially pure. They have not defiled themselves with women. And they follow him. And at some point, David will ascend to the throne and bring peace and take over. But at this point, he is a king on the run. And so, in a sense, that's where we are right now with Jesus, our king on earth. He is the rightful king. He is just not ascended to his throne, and he is being persecuted and chased by these imposters who are madmen and beasts who will be overthrown. And so these men, they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And in their mouth was found, no lie was found, for they are blameless. That's really an interesting phrase. I want to show you where that comes from. It's, the passage, Isaiah 53. And let's see. Elizabeth, would you read that for us? Isaiah 53. And it was, let's look at 7 to 9.
He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people, and they made his grave with the wicked and with the rich man in his death, although he had not done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth.
That same phrase, there was no deceit in his mouth. These 144,000, these believers who are in heaven right now, it says they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Where does the Lamb go? According to this passage, verse 7.
He goes to slaughter.
He goes to the slaughter.
Yeah. He goes to the slaughter. That's where he goes. And these follow him to the slaughter. They are the martyrs. They are the ones who lay down their lives, who follow the Lamb, and they are innocent. They're just like the Lamb. There's no deceit in their mouth. They speak the truth, unlike the lies of the beast, and they suffer for it.
And so I think of Jim Elliot. Remember, who's killed, and he and the missionaries who killed with him did nothing because they knew if they had fought back, they would not have been able to enter for the tribes. And their widows went right back, and many people have accepted Christ.
Yes,
with that example.
Absolutely, that's a great example of that. And that's been the, what does it say? The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, or something. It's right. This is how it goes. This is how these first fruits, these who have given their lives, they've been redeemed from the earth, but they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. That means we suffer with him, we go to the slaughter with him, and then we are raised to glory with him too, as his first fruits. So that's a little bit of the 144,000 as they come back into the scene. All right, so let's come back to Revelation 14. Any questions so far on this? All right. All right, now we have another scene. He sees now another angel. Let's take a look at that. Verses 6 to 7. Ray, would you get that for us?
Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water."
Okay, thank you. All right, so he looks now, and now he sees something else. What does he see?
Angel flying in mid-heaven.
All right, he sees an angel, and the phrase he says is what? Flying directly overhead. He's used that phrase before. Let me find a couple passages where he uses it 2 different times in Revelation. The first time we heard it was back in Revelation 8. It was about an eagle. I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead. Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth at the blast of the other trumpets. For the 3 angels are about to blow. And then we hear it again in Revelation 19. Not 190, sorry. 19 verse 17. I saw an angel standing in the sun, and with a loud voice he called to all the birds that fly directly overhead. Come, gather for the great supper of God and eat the flesh of kings and captains and mighty men. All right, so that whole concept of this angel flying directly overhead, what does that mean, you think?
Coming from heaven?
Coming from heaven. Yeah, this is a statement, a declaration coming from heaven above, looking right over and directly overhead. Is really an interesting phrase. When you think about I think about something flying directly overhead. I just get a vision of like a war where you're dropping bombs on someone, you're directly overhead them. So they're the target. He's directly over their heads, and he is proclaiming a gospel to the earth from heaven for you. This is not he's speaking directly to you from heaven here, to the earth. And it says that he's proclaiming something to those who dwell on earth. What's the phrase he uses here? What he's proclaiming?
Give God glory. Yeah. Because the hour of his judgment has come.
Yes.
Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water.
Yes. That's the declaration he makes is fear God, give him glory. The hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. He describes that. What does he call that message? In verse 6, he says he's proclaiming what?
Eternal
gospel.
An eternal gospel. Well, let's talk about that. An eternal gospel. This is what does gospel mean?
Good news.
It's good news, right? An eternal gospel. What does that mean? An eternal gospel.
It lasts forever.
News.
Yeah. It lasts forever. It's good news that is pertaining for all time. You know, we get messages of good news that are pertaining for a moment or for a particular location at time. So, you know, good news, you know, the war is over. That's good news. That's good news for that time in that place. To hear that, you know, I've got good news. You know, Hitler has surrendered. You know, that means nothing to us today. That meant something really big in 1945. But for today, that doesn't mean anything for us. The eternal gospel is a message for all time. Good news message here. And it is that word gospel is, well, let's take a look to proclaim that gospel. Isaiah 40. Let's take a look at that passage here. We have this phrase, this proclaiming good news here. Let's take a look at that. 9-11. And where do we leave off here? Rob, would you get that for us, 9-11?
Okay. Go on up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift it up, fear not. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young.
Okay. According to Isaiah 49-11, if you were to sum up this good news that's being given, it's really in two parts to this good news. What is the good news?
The good news is you're safe.
Yeah, he is coming to take care of his people, right? To deliver them, to reward them, to bless them, to care for them. There's also another part of the good news that's kind of along with that. But he comes, verse 10, how does he come?
With might, his arms rules for him.
Yes, he comes with might, and his arm rules for him, and his recompense before him. These are coming to a people who are oppressed and greatly suffering. They're God's people. And so God will come to deliver them, but also to bring justice upon those who've been oppressing them as well. This eternal gospel that is proclaimed. Another one is Isaiah 52 in verse 7. You know this one. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. And the breaking forth and the singing and so forth and so on. So this angel flying directly overhead is proclaiming a message of good news. What is the good news according to this angel in verse 7? What is the specific? He gives a command that goes along with it. The command is fear God, give him glory, worship him, right? But what is the good news that he is proclaiming right now?
Because the hour of his judgment has come.
Yes, the hour of God's judgment has come. That doesn't sound like good news.
Yeah, but that's what the people were praying for.
Exactly.
The 144,000.
Yes. What does the hour of his judgment mean?
He's going to overcome Satan.
Yes. This is the hour that he comes now to rule, to overthrow the evil tyrants, the dragon, the beasts, to destroy them and all who are rebelling, and to rescue his people, to vindicate us. That's the good news. And he says, fear God now, give him glory, and worship him. It's an interesting phrase. He says, the worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. That's an interesting phrase. Let's talk about that. Worshiping God who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. What does that all mean here?
Well, the springs of water is like you drink, like he's going to bring forth eternal water for consumption. Yeah. Where the seas, even though that's where all the beasts came out of, he still made that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the sea is salty, and the springs of water are fresh.
Yes. Yeah, it really encompasses all things, good and evil. All things are under his command. The heaven and the earth, that which is visible and invisible, all the powers. He's the one who made the dragon. He's the one who created these things. And the sea, this place of chaos and darkness, he created that too. It means he owns it and orders it. He has control over it. He's sovereign over it, as well as the springs of water. The first time we see such springs in the Garden of Eden, these life-giving springs of joy, it's all under his domain. It is not that God only made the good stuff and only has control over the good stuff. He made it all. Even the stuff that went bad, he still owns it and controls it and sovereignly will judge it and deal with it. So great little phrase there. All right, let's pick it up from here.
That also reminds me of those verses in Ezekiel that when we were reading Ezekiel about the water flowing from the temple.
Yes.
That
yes.
In 47, Ezekiel 47, that picture of the water just kind of flowing and a lot of water flowing.
Yeah. Yeah, that itself, I think that's one of those passages that really confirms that what Ezekiel is seeing is not a physical temple, but a true spiritual temple where springs of living water are flowing from the temple itself. It's the source of this, which confirms to Christ, of who says, out of me will flow springs of living water, referring to the Holy Spirit. But yeah, great. That's a great reference for us. Let's pick it up here, verse 8. And we'll get down to, let's just do the next paragraph here. So we have that first angel. Now, we have these three angels coming and proclaiming these things to earth. Why? Remember the three. One of the numbers 3 is significant. There's a couple different reasons why 3 is important. Do you remember the number 3? What that's about?
To do with the witnesses.
Yeah, it is part of that. The 2 or 3 witnesses establish things. Now, these are 3 witnesses from heaven establishing. And the number 3, as we use it, like holy, 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 it's for really emphasis of something. To repeat it 3 times is of great emphasis to the people. This is the word from the Lord to the world. And so the first word is fear God, give him glory. His hour of judgment has come. What's the second word? Now let's look at verse 8. let's pick it up back again here. Bob Thomas, would you get that for us?
Sure. Another angel, a second, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality."
Okay. The second angel gives a message. So the first angel is to all who dwell on the earth. Fear God, give him the glory. His hour has come now, and worship him. And the second statement is what?
Those who didn't.
Yeah. What is Babylon the Great? What is that a reference to?
The beast,
Earth, isn't it? The world.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another way that the beast is visualized for us as this Babylon. What is, remember in the scriptures what Babylon represents? Where do we first see Babylon?
In Genesis.
In
they
Genesis.
were building the tower.
Yep.
So all
Genesis.
people could reach heaven on
Yes.
their own accord.
Exactly right. Genesis 11 is the story of the Tower of Babel. That's where it gets its name. And it's the place, the city where instead of the people scattering and being fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth, they instead settle in one plane and build a tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves. It's the glory of man, the Babylon that we see. And so we have these two cities throughout the Bible. There's Babylon and there's Jerusalem. They both come in the book of Genesis, by the way. Where do you first see Jerusalem in the book of Genesis, if you remember? It wasn't known as Jerusalem at the time. Remember that one? It was actually called Salem at the time.
With Melchizedek.
Melchizedek. So you have Salem is first introduced with Melchizedek appearing to Abraham and blessing him in the name of the Most High God, mysterious figure who comes out of nowhere. And then you have Babel, this tower built by men to reach the heavens, and they're just set at war with each other from then on. And Babylon, of course, becomes the Babylonians, and Nebuchadnezzar, who destroys the temple and destroys Israel and brings out the people in exile. And Babylon continues sort of representing the glory of man. And so sometimes it's referred to the Romans Empire was considered Babylon, but not just Rome, but Jerusalem, strangely enough, becomes like Babylon in a sense, because of their decadence and immorality and corruption. In America, we would say, what's the Babylon of America, where we see this kind of decadence?
Washington, D.C.
Somersworth, New Hampshire.
Right? Washington. You might say, Hollywood. Las Vegas. These are all, little Babylons, you could say. They made all the nations to drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. That's really interesting. What does that mean that he refers to Babylon, this great city? Babylon the Great is a reference to Daniel 4:30, where Nebuchadnezzar is admiring, let's take a look at that one real quick, his kingdom. And he says, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?" That right there, Babylon the Great. And of course, what happens to him?
He eats grass for a while.
He becomes a beast at that point. So while the words were still in his mouth, he says, "O king, you've spoken, the kingdom has departed from you." Babylon has fallen. And Babylon is this, this power and the glory, and its power and glory has corrupted all the nations are drinking the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. That's how it is with power, isn't it? Power, what does it say? Power does what?
Corrupts.
Power corrupts, right? Power doesn't just, and what is meant by that is not simply that power corrupts the person who holds power. Power corrupts everyone. when there is great power, there is great corruption, because everyone around it is corrupted by this. How many times have you seen this, where someone who has great power and wealth, and all who are in his circle and sphere are corrupted by him, because they need to do, that's why they cover things up and they hide things, and they do all in their power, because they have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual morality. They've been compromised. They've been indulging themselves. And so it's not just Babylon the Great that falls, but all the nations fall with her.
Abraham Lincoln once said, you can tell a person's integrity by giving that individual power and seeing what they do with it.
Yeah, this is true. Very true. That's why, George Washington, I think, is rightly considered in such high esteem, is that he did the unthinkable, and he could have become king of America and chose to step down from that position. That was probably his greatest act he ever did for the country, was actually relinquishing power when he could have had it. He could have grasped it.
Right.
All right, verses 9 to 11. We have a third angel now speaking. And let's pick it up there. Bob Fowler, would you get that for us? Bob?
Sure. Yeah, okay, sorry, I was sidetracked. Yeah.
All right, no worries, 9 to 11.
9 to 11, okay. And another angel, the third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night. These worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name.
Okay. Wow. Now we're getting personal here. The third angel. So he says, first, fear God, give him glory. His hour of his judgment has come. And what is that going to mean? Well, first thing is Babylon is fallen. We're coming in an end. And then the third thing now is what's going to happen next. What's his warning here?
If you follow the beast, you're doomed.
Yeah. Yeah. Notice the repeat of the phrase, drink the wine. So those who drink the wine of the passion. By the way, passion there is the same word as wrath. The word wrath is in the Greek, it's orge, which we get the word orgy, the fury and the passion. So if you drink the wine of the passion of Babylon, of sexual immorality, you will drink the wine of God's passion, of his wrath. You can see the juxtaposition there. And what does that mean, to drink the wine of God's wrath? He talks about being poured full strength into the cup of his anger. By the way, where do we see a cup being mentioned in the scriptures of someone drinking the cup?
Christ.
Yeah. In the Garden of Gethsemane, right? If it's possible, take this cup from me. Right. He drinks the cup, and the cup is a reference to the cup of God's wrath. Mm-hmm. Ray, you going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was just saying that that it is a reference to the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah. And so those people who have received the mark of the beast, who have been going along with this, who've been participating with this, maybe because they're afraid, maybe because they are enjoying the indulgences of it, but whatever it is, those are going along and complying and playing the game and are receiving the mark, in a sense, who belong to the beast. Now you will drink the cup of God's wrath. And that will mean what? Tormented with Fire and sulfur. By the way, fire and sulfur, where we first see fire and sulfur in the Bible?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Fire and sulfur. Tormented with fire and sulfur. But this is not a one-time thing. It will happen in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. We've actually heard that phrase, the holy angels, before in Mark 8:38, where Jesus says, whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Use that phrase again there. Also adds a little bit more context to what is meant by having the mark of the beast, being ashamed of Christ, of not identifying with him because he is the suffering one. He is rejected by the world. And he says, on that day when he comes with his holy angels, you will feel the shame as well. Revelation 14 again. This seems to be a description of hell for us here. And what does it say about the experience of those who have the mark of the beast, those who belong and are under God's wrath?
They'll have no rest.
No rest. Day or night. This eternal torment, this is a horrifying scene that goes up forever and ever. No rest, day or night. These worshipers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. So we have this happening here. And then the final verse that we'll look at today is verse 12, which he said before, here's a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. What's the purpose of, why is John telling us these things? What's he trying to get from the church here? Why does he tell us about the beast and the dragon and then the 144,000 and then these angels? What's the whole point of this story?
Believe in God.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Stay strong.
Stay strong, stay faithful. You're going to suffer. It'll be worth it. It will be worth it. You choose your suffering. You have two choices here. You can choose to be with the Lamb, suffer with him, go to the slaughter with him, and then be redeemed for all eternity with joy and singing a new song. Or you can choose to align yourself with the beast and with Babylon the Great, where you will suffer forever. So choose. Do you want to suffer now or forever? There's your choice. There's no getting around it. For us as believers, there's not this option of where we can have our best life now and have eternal life.
Right.
I think what was John MacArthur say about if you have your best life now, you're going to hell. This is your best life now, right?
Yeah, this is a passage that, and there'll be another one, I think, in chapter 20 or so, that talks about eternal condemnation.
Yeah.
Which is important. The Jehovah's Witnesses have to dance around this passage.
Yeah.
They believe in annihilation.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I mean, it's troubling. It's very disturbing. I mean, the whole concept of eternal torment is really horrifying.
It's like, reminds me of that expression we say, pay now or pay later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either suffer now or we suffer eternally.
Yeah. But I think that doctrine of hell is so important for us because it really keeps us in perspective. It's worth the trouble that we are embracing as believers. You know, we're always tempted to compromise, to try to get out of things, to go weak kneed, and having that concept of what does eternity look like and what are your options? And eternity is a long time. This life is short. This life is so short. We only have a few years left. Can anything that we go through now compare to the weightiness of God's judgment when he comes? What it means for those who believe, and what does it mean for those who don't? It's a really sets things right.
it also gives me this feeling that I want to pray for the person that I like the least, because even they don't deserve what they're going to get. I mean, it just,
yeah.
Yeah,
it feels, I know what you're saying. I mean, it's like it should fill us with compassion, even for those who despise us, because I mean, what God will unleash upon the world is just, we don't have to get revenge. We don't need to, we can love them and even plead with them and be willing to die for them. Like you mentioned, Jim Elliot, willing to die for the people who want to kill us, because we can see what's coming. They can't. I think that's really, a lot of times I think our faith or lack of faith and lack of love is because we have a lack of imagination. We cannot imagine. We don't have a good imagination of what is coming. But when you can see down the road and get a clear vision of eternal glory and eternal torment, that really enables you to stand firm, but it also enables you to love people, even those who hate you, because, you know, I don't need to avenge myself. God will take care of that. And I just feel so horrible, so sorry for those who are lost. I think that's a fitting feeling, that kind of compassion. So, well, we'll break it here.
I just have one question about verse 10. When he's talking about the wrath of God and the self-torment, that's not the final judgment, is it? When people are thrown into hell?
I think it is. I think it's a foretelling of the final judgment. So again, remember,
because it says in the presence of the holy angels, but they'll be in glory with the believers.
Yeah,
right?
In the presence of the Lamb and in the presence of the holy angels. I think the point is that this is a vindication of the Lamb and of the faithful and of the holy angels. And so when it talks about things like, you will trample your enemies under your feet, kind of a thing, it's not a literal description. The significance is that these who are being tormented are the ones who led the Lamb and his followers to the slaughter. These are the ones who humiliated and sought to kill and silence the Lamb and his people. And now the tables have turned and the Lamb is standing, risen in glory, and they are the ones who have been cast down. It's a turning of the tables. And so the joy of, and there's joy in this, of seeing, these are not innocent people we're talking about. These are those who have tormented God's people, who've been a part of this, who are guilty and who deserve every bit of this. It's a day of vindication. That's the meaning of in the presence of the Lamb.
Okay.
Again, Revelation is not a chronological history of the future. He gives us scenes and he goes back and forth. And so he'll look forward to things and he'll come back to those things as well. So don't get, we don't have to get caught up in the timeline of things.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
It is a reference to that judgment day. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We'll pause it here. A second here.